A while back, I released How to be an S tier Wendy. It was my second video in a series about rushing raid bosses while using the unique abilities of characters. As usual, the comments were overwhelmingly positive, not because my video was particularly good, but because DST YouTube viewers are very supportive of their content creators, especially when they're on the smaller side like this channel. Even the GOAT himself was nice enough to drop some much appreciated words of encouragement. However, there was one comment that really stuck out at me. I thought I was pretty good at DST until I found your videos, lol. Now, I'm not too sure how serious Canderson9396 was when he posted this, and although I'm grateful for his compliment, it's that first sentence of his that didn't really sit right. I thought I was pretty good at DST until I found your videos. What entered my head right after I read that was, why does the skill of others determine whether you are good or bad at the game? Sadly, I think a lot of people have this perception of what makes a player good or bad, and I strongly reject this definition. In my opinion, Gao is probably the best DST player in terms of skill. He also has a YouTube channel where he posts crazy speedruns and other interesting DST content, so please check out his channel if you haven't already. But as the most skilled DST player, good wouldn't do him justice. A better word would be great or insane or phenomenal. Now, what if everyone who plays DST decided to invest thousands of hours into the game and they all became better than Gao? Does that mean Gao is no longer good at the game? I think that's just silly. Saying something like Gao isn't good compared to the average DST player would be perfectly fine, as it's an objectively true statement. But a person being good at DST isn't a statement comparing that person to another player or a group of players, it's comparing that person to the game itself. Therefore, I believe that determining how good a player is at the game should be based on how well the player is able to complete the objectives of that game. The mentality of determining what a good DST player is based on the skill level of others is partly why I made my somewhat controversial DST player tier list. This one, along with The Problem with Wolfgang, are my two most disliked videos, probably because people either disagree with the way I tiered players, or the fact that I even tiered players at all. The issue here is that everyone has a tier list of players in their head. Everyone has an opinion about what a noob is, what a decent player is, what a good player is, etc. The issue is what's good to one person might be great or noob to another person. The goal of the DST player tier list video was to define all these terms using clear measurable benchmarks that are based on the objectives of the game itself, and not some ambiguous, arbitrary, ever-changing metric that is the skill of other players. If you want to know my opinion about a player's skill level, all you have to do is look at the video. A noob is an F tier player who just installed the game and struggles to make it to Deer Claps. A person who makes it past that and is on their way to accomplishing the main objective of the game, which is to play the game as long as they like without dying, is a D tier player. A decent player is C tier, where they have obtained the skills to accomplish the main objective of the game, survive indefinitely. A good player is B tier, as things such as exploring the ruins, the ocean, and fighting bosses are a lot more dangerous, but at the same time are completely optional challenges that the player can choose to undergo. A really good player is A tier, as they're able to take on the ruins with limited prep time and have added the raid bosses or the toughest challenges the game throws at the player to their list of achievements. And finally, a great player, or S tier, is one that fulfilled the requirements for all the other tiers and is able to rush the toughest challenges in the game with limited preparation. A small side note on my tier list. In the video I said that an S tier player is capable of rushing 3 raid bosses before day 30, but I forgot to mention that in addition to 3 raid bosses, they should be able to rush the ruins consistently. When I made that tier list video, literally every person that I've ever come across who did a boss rush would rush the ruins as well, so I thought it was just a given that a person who's rushing multiple raid bosses would work a ruins rush into their run. So that's what I think the most objective measurement for what a good player is. Once again, it's totally fair game to say compared to X person, Y person is good or bad, but if you're saying the person is good at a game, then you're measuring the person against the game, not against other people who play the game. This leads me into my S tier series. This channel has done a bunch of videos on different characters that explains how to fulfill the requirements to be what I consider a great player, using the unique abilities of specific characters. Believe it or not, the main goal of these videos isn't to teach the audience how to play the game in the most efficient way as possible. It's also not to show off my skill or get the fastest time possible. My primary objective for these S tier videos is actually entertainment. The problem with DST is that the game is just an enormous time sink. In order to rush raid bosses, a player is going to have to invest a ton of time and effort into learning about the special abilities of the specific characters, the raid bosses, equipment, healing, food, and weapon costs, impact of RNG, routing, etc. And that's in addition to all the skills required to be considered C, B, and A tier. The primary objective of the S tier series is to allow the viewer to experience that without having to invest all the time and effort that comes along with it. The raid bosses are the closest thing to a story mode that DST has at the moment, so beating them using skillful gameplay and tactics that utilize the special abilities of each character is more entertaining and an experience that I wanted to be able to bring to people without them having to learn how to do it themselves. Now, what does this have to do with being good at DST? Nothing really. I just wanted to take the opportunity to clarify the main motivation for making these videos. However, the second reason for making these does have to do with measuring player skill. We all know that rushing bosses is obviously an attempt to test one's skill at the game. However, what I measure one's skill when it comes to beating bosses quickly by isn't just who can beat the most bosses in the earliest day count. My criteria for gauging boss rushes are basically threefold. The first is how much actual time it took one to do it. For most of DST's history, day count was an accurate reflection of how much time one spent in the game. However, about 2 years ago, Play added the pause ability into the game, which might not seem like much, but to be honest, changes the game in a pretty significant way. Since its release in 2016, one of the core elements of DST was your inability to pause, which meant that any planning had to be done at the expense of time, hunger, possibly sanity, and the threat of getting jumped by something you weren't expecting. This element of DST was especially impactful for things like boss rushing, since you had to juggle a million things in your mind at all times, and if you wanted to take a breather in order to collect yourself, you'd have to pay a price for that. If you don't burn time collecting yourself, then you run the risk of making huge mistakes, which is exactly what happened to me many times during the run I recorded for my S+ tier Wendy video. Because I didn't pause at all during that run, I ended up making a bunch of mistakes that ended up costing me many days. The one I noted in particular was me forgetting to bring enough ropes to upgrade Pearl's house. If I was a better player, I wouldn't have made those mistakes. I also wouldn't have made those mistakes if I paused the game and took my time to organize my inventory, study the map, and plan out my route before I made my next move. It's because of this, and the fact that I want to give my viewers an accurate depiction of how long it took me to do a run, that I personally do not use the pause feature when I do runs. Not saying there's anything wrong with using pause, but I'm saying if we're talking about player skill, the amount of game days a run was completed in is far less relevant than the amount of actual time a player spent in the game. So that's my first metric of gauging boss rushing skill, actual time spent on the run. The second metric I'd say is consistency. How consistent is a player capable of completing a challenge by a certain time? This metric pretty much just exists to remove the RNG factor out of the equation. Because RNG can vary so much in this game, it's possible for the same person to attempt 2 different runs and get wildly different results. So if a person gets insanely good RNG during a run, I wouldn't consider them necessarily more skilled than someone else just because they completed a run in a better time. Bringing the conversation back to my S tier videos, this is why for most of them I don't include Crab King or the Celestial Champion, because that questline is heavily influenced by RNG, the most notable part being finding the cookie cutter shells or getting the Celestial Orb. Talking about my Wendy run, I got pretty lucky with finding cookie cutters on my way to Pearl. If I had done another Wendy run right after, where it took me 4 days to find them instead, I probably would have gotten a worse time. However, that wouldn't mean that I'm any less skilled. So that's why I focused the S tier videos around beating the 7 raid bosses instead of all 9, because the times you can achieve will be far more consistent when rushing them. My final metric is simply which character are you using. A boss rush using really powerful characters like Wolfgang or Max Potential Wigfrid is going to require a lot less skill to pull off than one using one of the weaker characters like say Walter or Wes. Although if I were to be truly honest, when it comes to boss rushing, I'd rather break up player skill into how good they are with different characters, but that's just me. Anyways, that's my opinion on how good a player is when it comes to boss rushing. Notice how I specifically said boss rushing and not DST overall. In my DST player tier list video, I not only describe an S tier player as one who can rush multiple raid bosses in the early game, I also said that their ability to do so indicated that they were at the level where they could pretty much do whatever they wanted in DST. And here's probably my most controversial opinion when it comes to player skill. Once a player has reached the point in the game where they can do whatever they want, I think any difference in ability between them and another great player isn't due to lack of skill, but lack of will. Let's take Jazzy for example. With over 30,000 subscribers, I consider Jazzy one of the bigger DST YouTubers, so there's a good chance you know about him. He doesn't really do boss rushes as often as me, and I'd bet that if we were both to try to beat all the major bosses as fast as possible using our favorite characters, I'd probably be able to do it faster. But I don't think for a second that means I'm a better DST player than him, because the reason I can probably do it faster is because that playstyle just appeals to me more. Jazzy's skill level is at the point that if he wanted to, he could be better at boss rushing than me, or even people who are way better than me. He just doesn't have the desire to do so. And that's what I think about every player once they've gotten to the point where they're good enough to do anything they want. If they aren't as good at rushing bosses as someone else, it's not a lack of skill, but rather a lack of will. So while it's true that you can rank players based on their ability to rush bosses, I think this ranking just applies to their ability to rush bosses, which is honestly just one aspect of DST once you're good enough to treat the game as a sandbox. And that pretty much sums up my thoughts on what I think it means to be good at Don't Starve Together. The video isn't over yet though. Since this is supposed to be in celebration of reaching the 10,000 subscriber milestone, I wanted to give a bunch of shoutouts to my fellow content creators who make content that I enjoy. First is to Don Gianni. I will always consider Don Gianni the GOAT of DST YouTube. I learned a lot from his videos when he was making them, and I still continue to learn from them today. He's not just a GOAT for his extreme skill and the tips he gives, but have you seen the quality of his videos? I've literally never seen anything like it. While I'm doing these character guides with my super boring voice, Don's making videos that are more like movies or episodes of a cartoon series. Every other content creator is putting out guides or playthroughs, while Don is over here producing legit works of art. If I could get a content creator on YouTube to make a DSD series on something of my choice, I'd ask Don Gianni to make a YouTube series that centers around the survivors scattered throughout the continent and their journey where they meet each other and band together to oppose Charlie and the Moon in hopes of returning to the real world, because I think Don would be able to produce something incredible. Don hasn't been active for several years until recently, so if you're newer to the DSD scene, please check out his content. The second guy I'd like to give a shout out to is my friend Mattis of Mats. If you've watched my videos, then you know I've always been a fan of Woody. This is mainly because the Weremoose was such a cool concept with his infinite 90% armor, night vision, elemental protection, etc. The problem was that before his skill tree, the Weremoose was severely underpowered. I even made an entire video about it. Despite that, there were a few people who were such a fan of the Moose that they dedicated their entire YouTube channels to figuring out how to make him viable. The first guy to do it was Milquetoast, who eventually stopped posting. Mattis of Mats eventually picked up where Milquetoast left off. Mats is, in my opinion, the undisputed best Woody player on YouTube. While Woody players like me use the Twins of Terror to beat B-Queen because we're too afraid to fight her, true S-tier Woody mains like Matt will fight her head on without any walls and win. Speaking of the S-tier Weremoose, did you know that the original plan was for Mats to do that video? However, after he backed out, I ended up doing one instead. So sorry guys, I tried to get him to do it, but he backed out, so you're just left with me. Anyways, if you guys want to see how good Woody is in the hands of a true Woody main, check out Matt's channel. Next, I'm gonna give a shout out to Guile. Like I said before, Guile is the best DSD player on YouTube and probably the world. He'll do ridiculous stuff like speedrun the Ancient Fuel Weaver in 6 days using Wolfgang before Wolfgang got his skill tree. He's recently started to take his channel into a different direction with videos focused on journalism and scandals in the DSD community, which I honestly think is great, since no one's really doing that, which means when people do talk about stuff, oftentimes no one has all the facts straight. When I first started out making DSD content for the Lardy channel, Guile was kind enough to give my content his attention, and behind the scenes he's helped me from time to time with pointers, and to this day will tell me things about the game that I never knew. He's also pretty much the head of the DSD speedrunning community and manages the DSD category at speedrunning.com. So if you're interested in the pinnacle of DSD skill, speedrunning, and want to get all the facts straight with drama that may be circulating in the community, check out Guile's channel. Next, I want to shout out Jazzy. Like Don Gianni, I watched a lot of Jazzy's guides in the past, and still come back to them today when I need a refresher. Out of all the content creators on YouTube, I believe Jazzy makes the best guides. He goes into the appropriate amount of depth, speaks clearly, at a good pace, and the visuals demonstrate the point he's making very well. Not only that, but for some reason, a lot of viewers have been requesting an S-tier Wirt guide. First off, I'm not going to make one on Wirt because I have like 0 hours with her, and I learned my lesson from Wigfrid that I should just hold off on making these guides on characters until they get their skill trees. However, Jazzy is a Wirt main, and he does playthroughs of Wirt where he fights all the bosses. So if you want to see Wirt beating bosses with Merms, check out Jazzy. Not sure if this next guy needs a shout out, but I wanted to talk about Beard. Like Don and Jazzy, I watched and learned a lot from Beard's videos when I first started out. Over the years, I heard 2 constant criticisms of Beard. The first is that he steals art, and the second is that his videos are just regurgitated info from the wiki that's intentionally read at a slow pace to stretch the length of the video. I think Gao's video did a good job at laying out all the facts about the first criticism. I'm of the opinion that the video vindicated Beard. Anyways, the next criticism of Beard is that he just recycles the wiki at a slower pace. I honestly don't see anything wrong with this. First off, if you don't like someone's content, you can just choose not to watch it. But second, I would much rather click on a Beard video where someone reads the information to me while demonstrating that information in the game than have to click on the wiki and do the research myself. Believe it or not, that is a service that people do appreciate. I understand the slow reading speed, but what I do on all of Beard's videos is just change the playback speed to 1.5, and the problem is solved. To me, Beard is like the news channel of DSD, since as soon as an update or hotfix occurs, Beard is right there covering it all in the video, so I don't have to go to the wiki or Clay forums, boot up my PC, and start testing all the changes out myself. Although it's not flashy like a character guide with new tips and tricks, it's still an important service nonetheless, and one that I think people don't appreciate as much as they should. The next guy I want to shout out is Eberferatu. He's a smaller channel who puts on high-level Wartox gameplay. This guy put out a fully narrated video where he explained how he went around beating all the raid bosses using Wartox in just 57 days, which in my opinion is way more impressive than doing it with top tiers like Wolfgang or current Wigfrid. I told Eberferatu this before, and I still believe that if we lived in a just world, his video would be getting 100,000 views, because it's interesting, well done, and is by far the best, most comprehensive high-level Wartox guide on YouTube. This guy is the reason why I'll never do an S-tier series on Wartox, since he, like Mattis of Mats, just does it way better than me. I'm hoping that he'll do another one after Wartox gets his skill tree, but if he doesn't, please pester him in his comments of all his videos, because Eberferatu is where the pinnacle of Wartox skill is at. He also posts anti-Wort propaganda from time to time, so if you hate fish people, even more of a reason to check out his channel. Next is Jakey. As the biggest content creator on YouTube, Jakey needs no introduction. He has over 200,000 subscribers, and his videos constantly get hundreds of thousands of views, and in my opinion, Jakey deserves every single one of them. The amount of time, the amount of effort, the amount of research, the amount of editing, etc. that he puts into his videos is astounding. Not only that, but he puts the effort to develop his skills at the game in order to pull off some impressive boss rushes with characters like Wolfgang, Wigfrid, Wanda, and WX. I think the best thing about his videos is that they feel so complete. He plays through all the seasons of the year and beats every boss, which means you get to see how a skilled DST player interacts with all the elements of the game using a specific character. To be honest, it's Jakey's all-boss playthroughs that somewhat motivated me to make my S tier series. As a Wendy main, I appreciated the effort he put into making his Wendy video, but I felt that the video didn't do Wendy justice. I also felt the same about his Weber video, and after making boss rushing guides on those two, I decided to just keep them coming. This is nothing against Jakey, and I honestly hope that people would do the same for my videos. I don't main Winona, Wormwood, or Woody. If someone saw one of my guides on these characters and thought I was doing a disservice to their main, nothing would make me happier than for them to turn around and make a video which does the character proper justice. By the way, if you are one of those people, send me an email and I'll be sure to shout out your video with a YouTube post. As a matter of fact, that goes for any YouTube video that someone feels passionate about. If you want me to shout it out, send me an email and I'll take a look at it, because I'm sure there are people who post good stuff that I haven't come across on this platform. Speaking of people who should be doing videos on their main, the next guy I want to shout out is Amizlari. Amizlari is a Willow main, but he's also one of the best players in the world, and he's an active part of the DST speedrunning community, and able to do ridiculous stuff like killing Dragonfly on day 1 or Toadstool on day 2. He's also way better at Willow than me, and thus falls into the same cap as Eberferatu, where I'm never going to make a Willow boss rush because this guy will do it way better. So please, flood the comments section of his YouTube videos to get him to do a Willow boss rush. The only thing is that Amizlari has never done a video where he uses his voice. It's all subtitles. So Amizlari, if you're watching this, please either do a voiceover of it, or if not, use AI to read your script for you, because I think either would be much more preferable to text. But yeah, if you want to see the pinnacle of Willow gameplay or speedruns, check out Amizlari's content as well. The next guy I want to shout out is Pogzar. Pogzar really doesn't need an introduction. This guy has 40,000 subscribers and has got to be the king of DST YouTube shorts. He also has a bunch of good videos like his Survived 100 Days series or his farming guides. I know the 100-day format has been done to death on YouTube, but when it comes to DST, Pogzar does it the best, as his videos are highly edited, entertaining, and best of all, the topics he picks are interesting. I'm especially a fan of his most recent 100-day series, where he focuses on learning how to play specific characters. Also, this guy is clinically insane, considering his streams often last for up to 12 hours. Jokes aside, I think what really differentiates Pogzar from the rest of the DST content creators is his fast-paced, flashy editing style, as well as his personality. When I watch a Pogzar video, I feel like I'm watching a YouTuber with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, which makes me wonder if focusing on just DST content is holding this guy back from being the YouTube sensation that I feel he should be. Anyway, Pogzar is a cool guy with high quality content that appeals to a more broader audience, and I think if anyone other than Jakey deserves to have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, in my opinion it will be either this guy or Don Gianni. The next guy I want to highlight is the dude called The Chosen One. He falls into the same category as Eberferatu. He makes high-level, comprehensive, entertaining videos that are criminally underrated. The Chosen One made a fully narrated series where he beat literally every boss in the game as Wigfrid, including the new ones like Crystal Deerclaps to the ones you aren't even supposed to fight, such as Enraged Klaus, Enraged Dragonfly, and the Shadow Knight. He does it all in 100 days while explaining everything and editing in music that fits the situation. I commented on one of his videos that his series is criminally underrated, and I stand by that comment. I wonder if instead of splitting the series into 5 parts, if he had just packaged it into a single video and called it Beating Every Single Boss in 100 Days or something like that, that his video would have blown up. Because honestly, it's just way better than all these other 100-day videos that get crazy amounts of views. And that's it for the shoutouts. There are also other DST content creators that I watch, like Catperson, who is sort of a mixture of Jazzy and Jakey content, Just Exo, who doesn't post that often these days, but makes probably my most favorite types of DST content, which are opinionated rants, Watata, who does a little bit of everything from guides to boss rushes. Then there's Gabrielle, who's the extremely rare Winona main, and I hope that either him or my friend Whiskas decides to make a comprehensive boss rush video once her skill tree drops. Oh, I also have to mention DVG, who's also a Wendy main. If I had to describe the content of DVG's channel, it would be explaining and exploiting the mechanics of DST at a very deep level, and also providing analysis of individual characters. So I'd recommend DVG's channel if you want to learn about crazy hidden mechanics or light character analysis. So that's finally the end of the video. I know there are other YouTube content creators out there, so if I forgot to mention you, please forgive me. DST is a pretty tough game to make content for, as most of your time is spent doing boring stuff like prepping, and it's not an insanely popular game that's beautiful to look at like Ark Survival. Except for guys like Jakey, pretty much all the DST content creators are essentially doing this for free, so I'd highly recommend subscribing to all of them, and remembering to like their videos because they'll feel appreciated for their efforts, and in turn be more motivated to put out even better content. To make sure there's not a conflict of interest, please don't do this for me or my videos. I'm just requesting you help and support everyone else mentioned in this video, because pretty much all of them are severely underrated. Anyways, thanks for watching, take care and have a great day.